everybody, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for coming back. This is week 2 in our tree farm sew along. Today I'm going to be walking you through how to make the tractor block. So grab your fabric and let's get stitching. Alright, we're going to start with our FFFs and our Qs. Now I'm not going to give you the measurements to any of these squares because it's not my pattern. But I'm going to take my little squares and I'm going to draw a line on the diagonal on the back. We're going to see if my pen will write this time. Okay, there's one. You know, I'm sure they could see better if you'd move. Okay, so we've got our 3 little sets, and we're going to take on opposite corners one at a time, and we're going to stitch on the drawn line, and then we're going to fold it up, and then we're going to take the next one, line it up, and stitch on the drawn line. And then we'll fold, we'll press, and we'll trim. We're going to do that for all 3 of these blocks. So, starting of a new project, start with a new needle, and make sure you've got plenty of bobbins. I'm just lining these up. I'm using my Seam So Easy guide by Lori Holt. I will link this in the description. I love this because I don't like to pin, and I have it lined up. And so I'm just following the line with the line on my Seam So Easy guide. Alright, so before I take these to the iron, I'm going to finger press them. And then I'm going to run them back through with the other side. Make sure you have your lines going in the right direction. Okay, now I will trim these, and then we're going to take them to the ironing board. So we've got, I'm going to open this back up, and I'm going to set those seams. Just kind of relaxes those threads. All right, now I'm going to take this, now I want you to, I'm not wiggling my iron, I'm just holding it there. Now before we cut these off, I'm going to give it one last press. And then I have some clappers that my husband made that we're just going to leave that there, and we're going to come back to our project. All right, we're going to come down to this bottom piece, and we've got our background fabric, and we have a Q, a U, and a ZZ. And I'm going to take both of these, and we're going to turn these over, and I'm going to draw a line down the back of both of these. We're going to use the stitch and flip method, corner square triangles, flying geese, whatever you want to call it, because they're all made the same way. Alright, now we are actually going to take our background fabric right side up. These are right side down, and we're going to turn them. We're going to do one at a time, and we're going to stitch on the line. We're going to fold this up. We're going to press it, trim it, and then we're going to come over here, stitch on this line, press it, and trim it. Now, if you can see, I stitched just a hair off that line. That way, when we fold it, it should match up just right. So I'm just going to finger press this. Take our other side, line it up. And do the same thing. Okay, so I stitched that. Now I'm going to take all this out and then see you at the ironing board. Okay, these should be done. So we'll trim those up in just a minute. Now we're going to press our you can take a ruler if you want and trim off a quarter of an inch. Just line up that seam line and trim it. I'm just going to use a pair of scissors. Okay. Now that I've trimmed those, I'm going to take these back to the ironing board, give them a good press, put them back under the clapper because I want these flat, and then we will square them up. All right, I've got this out from under our clappers. I'm going to trim this up. Again, you can use your ruler, or I'm just using a pair of scissors. I'm going to go press this one more time, put this back under the clappers, and we will move on. Now we're going to take our BB and our P, and we're just going to stitch at the bottom. We're just going to line it up using a 1/4 inch seam. I'm just going to finger press this open. We're going to take M. So we've got these two. We're going to take letter M, and we're going to add it to the side. Alright, that laid down nicely. We're just going to open this up. Trim, trim. I have a little bowl behind me. I'm actually doing a live video on how to decorate that little jar that I'm putting all my scraps in. Alright, so we're going to go give this a press, and we're going to gather our other pieces, and we're going to put a little bit of this together. Alright, we've got all of this pressed, laying nice. Set that seam. So we've got this part, and we've got our little pieces right here. So we're going to take one of these and leave it alone. All right, so these two we're going to take and we're going to match them up. We're going to stitch just to the inside on the line, just a little, what do they say, a scotch just off the line so that it folds nicely. And we're going to fold it up so it's going to look like this when we get done. We're going to do that to both of these. Okay, so I'm lining this up. I'm lining this up with my black fabric. It should be all squared up. And I'm going to stitch just to the hair inside of the line. Alright, see how nice and flat that one is? Alright, we're going to set these seams. Now, I'm looking to see, I stitched to the inside here, so I'm going to fold this up this direction. And press. And then here I stitched just to that side, so I'm going to fold in this direction. Just going to kind of finger press a little bit. Okay, I'm going to move that out of the way. I need you to scoot because you're on my stuff. Yes. All right, we're going to take... Y'all have no idea how happy I am that she is in a good mood. Okay, so we're going to take the bottom half of our tractor cab. Ow! You stink! And I'm going to take the two ends. We're going to stitch and flip. So I'm going to take these two and draw a line down the back. So we're going to take now make sure, the one thing I want you to make sure of, when you're laying this out, you're paying attention to the pattern and what direction your lines are going. So for this particular piece, our lines are going from the inside to the outside corners. So we're going to take that one to the top of our cab. We're going to do the same thing on both ends. Now, I don't like to pin, but for right now, I am going to pin. So I will have, see, I almost messed up right there. Alright, so we're going to take this one and we're going to take this one to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch just a smidgen on on those lines. We'll take these and we'll press these and then we'll get them trimmed down. I brought these over from the ironing board. We're going to trim these down. Okay. Now let's put this together. We're going to take this block. Now I'm trying to be very careful how I lay out the steering wheel. We're going to stitch this together just like a 4-patch. We're going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam, and then we'll fold it open, fold it like this, and we'll stitch a 1/4 inch seam. All right, we're going to take these. I'm going to lay them. I'm going to get this pin. I'm going to pin the side that I need to stitch on. Same thing here. I'm going to pin the side that I need to stitch on. I'm going to try and match where this black and white meets this black and white. So now we're going to take the top to the bottom, line everything up the best we can. When it comes to all these seams like this, a lot of times I will pin. And there we have our little steering wheel block. Now we're going to take this, I'm going to press it real good, try to open the seams, and leave it under the clappers. We're going to give that just a minute, and then we'll move on. All right, so we've got this out from under the clappers. I've got it all squared up. We're going to take this and we're going to add our top piece, right sides together. We're going to stitch right across using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then we're going to take this piece and we're going to add it to the bottom, stitching using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and it's going to open like this, and this is going to open to the top. All right, so here we have our steering wheel and then our little piece at the bottom. We're going to press those seams and set them, then open that up. Some of you may have a strict rule of you always press your seams open. Some of you maybe, nope, I always press to the dark side. I don't really have a hard and fast rule. I would just like flat seams. I have a tendency of pressing them in one direction just because that's how I was taught. we have our steering wheel piece and we have our cab piece. So we're going to stitch the cab piece to our steering wheel piece. We're going to try and match these seams right here. All right, we're going to take and stitch these two together, lining up where these meet. Now I'm going to actually finger press these two open right here, because that is a lot of fabric that this is going to have to go through, and I don't want it to push either way. Much better. Much, much better. All right, so this is section B if you're following along in the pattern. This is the smokestack section. So we're going to take our little square here and our square here, and we're going to draw a line on the back because we're going to make corner square triangles with these. Okay, we're going to take this one and we're going to stitch it in this direction. And then for our smokestack, it's going to go in this direction. Set those seams. Let's take these and trim them. All right. So for our smokestack, we're going to take this piece and we're going to stitch right sides together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're going to open it up and then we're going to add the top piece. Then we're going to take this piece, we're going to stitch this up, stitch across using a 1/4 inch seam. So we're going to take all of this to the sewing machine. we have our chimney stack in the bottom. Now we're going to take our background piece right here and we're going to fold it over, stitch, and then we're going to add this, and that whole section will be done. Just going to finger press that down. We're going to grab our bottom half and add it, get everything lined up. Alright, so this is section C. This is our big tractor tire. We're going to be doing a lot of stitch and flip corners in this section. We're going to stitch and flip these, this, our wheel, and we'll start drawing the lines on the back. We're going to take all of this to the sewing machine and stitch this all down first. before I trim all these, I'm going to make sure that I have them going in the right direction. This goes on the bottom. This is going to go on the top. Okay, now I'm okay to trim everything. All right, now we're going to take this. We're going to add it onto the bottom. We're just going to stitch across using a 1/4 inch seam. And then we're going to add, so now we're going to take this and we're going to stitch to either side. So we're going to add the top and the bottom. Can you see that with her? And then we're going to add the side. So here's our big wheel. Next, we're going to move to D in our tractor. We only have 4 pieces to make this section. We're going to take this. We're going to make a corner square triangle. Now we're going to take our red piece, we're going to stitch this on, then we're going to take our OO and we'll stitch it on to the bottom. Here is our letter D. Now let's move on to our last piece, which is our small wheel. And this is going to be very, very similar to our big wheel. We're going to do corner square triangles on these. So I need to draw my line on the back of those. We're going to do corner square triangles on the back of these. And more corner square triangles. And then our little, this is our little wheel. We're going to put these in the corners on here. So let's get our lines drawn. I'm going to start with these little ones first. Now on the wheel or the little tire, I'm going to finger press that down before I stitch the other one on. Alright, so we've got just making sure they're all going in the right direction. And this goes in this, okay. Alright, we're going to take this and we're going to stitch it down using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then we're going to take our outsides, stitch that down, and take this one and stitch it down. Alright, so we have the top part of our tire. We have there we go. Alright, so we're going to stitch this on, then we're going to add it to the very top. Alright, there we have our wheel. I've got it squared up. So now let's take all 5 of our sections and let's put it all together. I'm looking at this going, wait, something's not right. Alright, so we're going to stitch these 2 together. And then we're going to stitch these 2 together. Then we'll stitch it to the top. And then we'll stitch both halves together. Now, I like to find a point that should match up as a starting point, because I do my very best to make sure these blocks are straight and accurate. Okay, so we're going to take this, flip it over, Get this lined up the best we can, and then stitch it down. All right, now we're going to take both halves, line them up, and stitch down using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So we're going to add our grass to the bottom of our tractor, and that's going to be the last step in finishing our tractor block. Here we have our finished tractor block.